calling the wrong number, so I couldn't add it to your Facebook because I don't have a passcode.
Okay. I'll share it as soon as we get going, though. I can share from
Um,
yours.
yep. And I'm sorry if I
Perfect.
had thought about it, I would have did it. Wait, hold on. Let me see real fast.
Hold on, we're live.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That is
You don't want
perfect.
you don't want to give me your Facebook password live?
No,
Okay.
but
He didn't
You're
but
know
it.
just
point.
And so where are we at? I mean, where can I find it at? The shared.
it's already live on your page, Art.
I don't see it.
It's because you are you on your Boost mobile phone?
Mm,
Oh,
mm, mm,
y'all got jokes around here.
mm.
Y'all got jokes
That's just
around here.
disrespectful.
Oh
He
man,
likes his grits with sugar.
It's only disrespectful if it's not true.
hey, I don't see it. I don't see it. Anybody else see it?
It's on my page. And so let's see here if I see it on your page.
Oh, I see it on your page, but it's not on mine. So we must be under yours. We're under your Facebook page.
And we are live
That's
with all
100
of these technical
on
difficulties.
yours. Art.
We are live with all of the
No, it's
difficulties.
all
There's
good.
about 3 people on right now. We're going to give folks a chance to we usually do about 5 minutes of a warm up to just like allow folks to kind of jump on. And so please jump on. Please share with your friends. There's a lot going on with COVID right now. I've got all of the sincerely ignorant questions to ask the two doctors and Art. And so we go push it around, but just giving everybody a little bit of time to jump on. Again, share with your friends that have questions about COVID. We will, as we get closer to the end of this, open this up and ask questions from the audience. And so you can start throwing those questions in now. If you have a minute, if you're just jumping on, and if not, just hold out with us for a minute as we get a few more people logged in. I'm going to share this to my page right now.
All right. If y'all will
I shared it from your page.
okay. I did try.
Dr. Deborah, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm in an interesting space when it comes to COVID because there are so many things we thought would happen, and this is the way it's going to play out. And if we would just do this, then this will happen. We get all of the curveballs, and I need y'all to help me understand them. Like, we got new names. We've got breakthroughs. Matter of fact, from what I'm understanding, the breakthrough is just the thing now. Like, I need to understand what the vaccine is doing, what it's not doing. I got all kinds of questions. And so we're going to get in here in a minute, but I'm telling you, Isaiah, the dude who works out of his basements on Sundays at 6, he is lost. I was going to say perplexed, but I'm just lost.
Hey,
so I've got some questions. Look like Art probably got some questions too.
hey, I mean, it's tripped out because, an article came out right after me and Dr. Furr-Holden had done a little video, the video, and it was cannabis compounds may prevent COVID-19 infection, study suggests. And it was done at Oregon State University. They even published a study. And I'm sitting up here like, you know what? Why did I, and this is everybody else's thought, why did I take a risk and getting the vaccination when I could have done that? But at the same time,
when you could have did weed, I'm ready. This conversation is going to be amazing.
I mean, I don't care.
And you said this is first of all, Art, just make sure you speak for Art when you say stuff like that. You said this for everybody thinking.
This was not in the email when y'all asked me if I was.
I mean, no.
I said, "What are we talking about?" Okay, nobody said weed.
No, I mean it's an article, and I mean I thought we was talking about COVID-19.
I'm just saying, I saw that article, by the way.
We are to talk about what we can use. I mean, because we need everything. I'm not saying let's debate which one is better, or I shouldn't use the vaccination shot, or I shouldn't use this right here. It's just We need everything we can.
Art is saying that if the Swiss cheese model needs to include a gummy or two, then let me know. That's pretty much what I'm hearing right now. So we're gonna jump right into this conversation.
Cheese model, but
we're gonna see how this works. But again, I always start off by saying my name is Isaiah Oliver. As if people don't see it, it's in the corner there. I'm Isaiah Oliver, President and CEO of the Community Foundation Greater Flint. Always excited to be on, even when it's the Sunday before MLK Day. I'm excited to be on because there's lots of information floating, and I like to get information from the folks that I know are the source. They have the answers, or they can get us the answers. And so today we're joined by Mr. Arthur Woodson, Dr. Deborah Furr-Holden, and Dr. Jennifer Edwards Johnson. And so we're going to jump right in just by having a little bit of an introduction. I know folks usually know who these people are, but Art, if you can start just telling folks why you thought it was important to do this today. We go from Art to Dr. Jennifer Edwards Johnson. Just tell folks who you are and why you jumped on tonight, and then we'll close out with Dr. Deborah Furr-Holden telling us who she is and why she jumped on this evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Arthur Woodson, and the people have been asking, different types of questions. Just seeing the hospitals full, people dying. They saying Omicron isn't that bad. It's mild. It might have severe symptoms, but I mean, I never seen so many deaths. Even when it first came out, I have never seen so many people catch it, so many people die, and it seemed like it was worse now than back then, but it was less talk than it was back then. So it seemed like everything reversed, where people was being informed, and than what it is now. And I just felt like, hey, you know what? If I have to, I wasn't never gonna advocate for the vaccination, the shots. But after seeing what was going on and how highly transmittable Omicron was, I was like, hey, you know what? I got to get out here and say something, because people were dying, and a friend of mine, Tony Palladino, Diablo Reeves, a whole host of others. What's her name? Melatrice McKinnis. I mean, I can go on, and it's just sad, that this COVID-19 is like this. So I'm glad that you all allowed me to come on tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Isaiah. Jennifer Edwards Johnson. I'm a family doctor and community assistant dean of the Flint campus of MSU's College of Human Medicine. So we have a bunch of student hospitals doing this work, working on the front lines. I've been in and out of the hospital working on the front lines. And part of the reason I'm here is I see patients who are that there's a lot of information that needs to be clarified. Things are actively every day. They're learning new information, like that study at Oregon. So I think it's important that we have people can go to and have these conversations with.
Awesome. I'm Dr. Deborah Furr-Holden. I'm an epidemiologist. That means I study epidemics and disease outbreaks. Most epidemiologists like me were doing something else before COVID. And then, we just sort of switch gears. Same skills, same tools apply to understand an outbreak of infectious diseases like COVID. I'm here because I just know there's so much for people to wade through. And I just feel like the local trusted messenger is, needed now more than ever. And Art calls me with a million questions that I know other people have. And so it's always fun to jump on with this brother and, do some good dissemination.
So, I mean, we jumped right into it earlier, so we just go carry on. Dr. MJ, you are breaking up a little bit for everyone. So I'm going to throw this one to Dr. Furr-Holden to start. Dr. Furr-Holden, there's some studies that are happening. As a matter of fact, there are lots of studies happening. We're 2 years into this deal. People are trying to figure out what they know and what they don't know. And there is a study that talked about cannabis as a potential way of offsetting the impact of COVID or exposure or something around health. And if that is floating around, what is true about it? What do we know about it? What is it that people need to understand? Or is it so new that there isn't a lot of real information?
This the cannabis study?
This is the cannabis study, the Oregon State University cannabis study that we kind of started off with, but it's real. I mean, it's a real question, because when you see it and you're telling me, hey, get the vaccination. Okay, get the second vaccination. Okay, get the booster. Okay, make sure you wear your mask and wash your hands and make sure that you got good ventilation. And then you might even want to sanitize your nose and sanitize your airways and make sure that you're gargling with your Listerine. And there's the potential that if you have a gummy or two, I mean, I don't know. Like, help me understand what this thing is telling us, because right now I'm here for understanding everything. There's a whole lot of information floating.
Okay, great. So for all my weed lovers out there, I'm gonna ask you to take this one with a grain of salt. So the basics of what this study was. First of all, I want to be clear. This is a very preliminary study. This study was not done in humans. They call it the marijuana petri dish project. They looked at whether these, particular compounds that are found in cannabis have any binding properties to the COVID molecule. And what they found was that 2 of these cannabinoids, which are, in the family of THC, would bind to the spike protein. The thinking is, if it can bind to the spike protein, which is the lock, it will stop it from unlocking your cell and letting the whole virus in. That study was small scale, and it was done in a petri dish. The gap between a study done in a petri dish and studies done in humans is like light years apart.
2 years.
I mean, it's just like it's.
So Doc, tell me if this makes sense. And this is me responding to what I would describe as critics, but at this point, I feel like everyone who's a critic has some reason to be. There's a lot of information floating, but there's a critic that will say, hey, you developed this vaccine way too fast, so I'm not taking it. But then they might develop a CBD kind of related response in a petri dish, and I should maybe take advantage of that one. So what would you say to a person that's wrestling with whether or not they do this, but they don't have the vaccine yet, or they haven't figured out whether or not they're going to get the vaccine or the booster for their families?
I think it's an interesting question, right? You have to, whenever you're making a decision about what you're going to do with your health, it's a risk-benefit ratio. The question is my risk higher with whatever disease or problem that might happen? Is it higher than this potential therapeutic option? Is it higher than what happens when I get the vaccine? Is it higher than any sort of other therapy, including antibody therapy? In this case, your example is CBD, right? That's always the question we should be asking ourselves. In 99% of cases, right, there's a higher risk of COVID in any sort of COVID-related illness than there is with the vaccine. But I think we have to back up just a little bit and remind ourselves that we are actively learning new things in the middle of a pandemic, right? Every day we're learning something different, and it feels like things are actively changing because they are. This isn't something that we have old data on. This isn't something, everything we learn is new. We learn new things about each variant. We learn about how infectious the variant is, how transmissible the variant is, and those things change. And so we should expect that our data is going to change and actively catch up. So we see one of the things we know, and Dr. Reynolds will often say, is vaccines are primary prevention. They're the first line of prevention, right? And we understand and we know vaccines really well. Throughout the pandemic, we're going to learn about new therapies. And when we get good data and robust data, then we can have conversations about whether those therapies are helpful or not. We have really, really, really good data on vaccines at this point. I would say we don't have really, really great data on CBD at this point. We have an initial study that's helpful and gives context to what we might think about, but we don't have the sort of data that we have with vaccines.
But all right, so Ben, the person I am, you're on mute.
Oh, I just want to add one other thing for clarity. The order of progression. You start off in a petri dish. And then you move to what's called animal models. So they'll test whatever therapeutics in mice or in some other kind of primate, monkeys, etc. And then you move from that to the human clinical trials. When we skip steps, and we don't really skip steps, but here's what happened. And it is a great example. Hydrochloroquine. Hydrochloroquine was touted as, oh, it will, prevent COVID or improve symptoms or, etc. And that was from these small scale Petri dish studies, and no other studies were done. And people were then going to hospitals demanding to get hydrochloroquine, which lo and behold, it turns out was not an effective therapeutic or intervention for COVID. So this isn't the first time that this has happened in COVID. And I understand that people are looking for solutions, and they're looking for things that might be sort of more homeopathic or natural based remedies. But this is just the early small study done in a Petri dish, nothing that is actionable at this point.
Hey,
But
Dr.
I guess what I look at right now, being devil's advocate, and I know people on my page, I know all of us probably, we rebel, radical, always thinking outside the box. So I'm gonna think like them right now, right? One of the things that they would say is, well, they didn't test the vaccine. They skipped, a whole lot of other different cycles, and they didn't care about pushing that out there. But when it came to this natural, now all of a sudden we have to go through the animals and this and that and that and this. So they would say that. And I guess what I say to them is I done dealt with a lot of doctors, especially during the water crisis, and you all go by the science and data, and your conversation and what you relay is totally different from what I say on the street. So one of the things that I say to them is that whatever we think can work, because like Dr. EJ said, she said that this is new and it's forever changing. And if it's something that can, maybe this variant reacts differently with cannabis, and the next variant or the variant before works different with the vaccine. Because my cousin, he smoked blunts every day, all day. And he had the vaccine, 2 vaccine shots, and a booster. And man, I'm talking about, he was calling saying that he felt like his chest was caving in. So he had both of them, and that variant still kicked his butt. So I understand what you all are saying, and it's my position is that whatever we can get out there, the information to hey, if you don't take the vaccine, please, look into this right here.
The reason I won't back that is because the statement that we didn't test the vaccine in humans isn't accurate. Just Pfizer alone had nearly 50,000 participants in the clinical trial, in the phase 3 clinical trial. Hundreds of thousands of people participated in the clinical trials before it came to humans.
No. I'm not saying that they didn't test the humans. No, I'm saying that normally the research are done in the animals, and then it's done in the humans, and then it goes through other stages. But with the vaccine, it skipped the animals under the emergency and went straight to humans, and they tested it to where they asked an FDA not to release the data for 55 years. So that's what scares a lot of people also. And I mean, I totally understand what you and Dr. EJ are saying. It's just for the people who is hell-bent on not putting anything in their body like the vaccination, and this right here is totally different. And if it can help them, I mean,
I would put it in the category of snake oil right now. And I might be many things. I'm no snake oil salesman. I would not tell anybody, based on this small scale study in Petri dishes of 2 distinct cannabinoids, that marijuana will help you in the fight against COVID. There's just nothing right now to support that. And I'm not saying it couldn't be possible, but the data don't support that statement
All right.
right now.
So give me. Oh, go ahead, Dr. EJ.
Yeah.
I was just
going to jump in.
We have a bunch of animal studies on Pfizer vaccine, like several at this point, right? And so we didn't skip steps.
I mean, at first they didn't have any though. At first, when it first came out.
So one, let me jump in here. One, because you all know how I roll. We go get off of this thing before 7 o'clock. That way we're respectful of everyone's time. We also want to make sure that we're getting these questions that are popping up in the chat asked. And so I've got a couple of questions. I'm going to start out with Miss Tammy, not only because she's first, but because long before guys on the north side was doing freaky parts, she was working at Eddie and Earl's, laying us out, making us look good. So I'm asking her question first. Miss Tammy says, when you have COVID, this probably comes to you, Dr. EJ. When you have COVID, does sleeping on your stomach really help with your oxygen levels?
Yeah, so there's a lot of evidence that sleeping on your stomach is you might have heard something called proning, right? And in the hospital, when people are sick or when people are at home, we'll tell them to sleep on their stomach as long as they can. And really, that's just gravity, right? If you think about it, it's trying to get all of the force off of your lungs to help you breathe and help you improve your oxygen exchange. And so there's a lot of good evidence that in people who are really symptomatic with COVID, that sleeping on your stomach can help. So it is something that is very low risk and something that is certainly worth doing if you're someone who's symptomatic with COVID. But I would encourage you to make sure you're in touch with your doctor if your symptoms are so severe.
I'm going to jump right in here. I've got Philip next, and I'm coming to you, Jay, just after that one. Philip's question kind of leans back into this home remedy CBD conversation we were just having. And his question ultimately becomes, is there going to be a point where people will have to start paying obscene prices for vaccines or boosters? And if these home remedies like the CBD is an option, and I guess this is saying if it becomes an option, how do we utilize it or leverage it or align it with what will be high costs for folks that typically are underinsured or not insured? And so this becomes an option.
So I can say a couple things about that. Number one, fear breeds consumption. When people are afraid, how we cushion that fear oftentimes is we go buy things. That's why when they call for bad weather or when the pandemic hit, you couldn't get toilet paper or Lysol or, sanitizer or wipes and things like that. Because when people are afraid, they go out and they spend a lot of money. And I really don't want people to do that. I don't want people to rush out and start buying things with this false hope that it's going to somehow, keep them protected during COVID. So that's the first thing. So that's why, and there are lots of great home remedies that people do. Age-old wisdom that's been passed down, simple things like drinking hot tea. And the old ladies used to do the hot toddy. And I think they had a little shot of bourbon or something in it. There's actually real value behind some of these. Right.
Burners.
So there's that. And then the reality of it is, yes, should we be getting ourselves empowered around really how to be healthy and what we can do that's in our hands in addition to the vaccine? Absolutely. Because what is predictable? And I don't have a crystal ball, but eventually, just like with all medications, we will be paying for vaccines. That is just predictable. Our government doesn't provide us with free healthcare. We're in that season right now, but I doubt it will be in perpetuity.
So Dr. Furr-Holden, I'm going to ask Jay's question, and then I want both you and Dr. EJ to answer that question. And then I'm coming to Art for the next question that he has in his head that he wants to throw out there. So the next question I'm going to ask of Jay's is going to go to you, Dr. Furr-Holden, then you, Dr. EJ, and then Art, you got a question ready to throw at us, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So this one is to anyone who will answer. I've already said who folks are going to jump in. In a hypothetical world, where you are now the director of the CDC, what would your immediate messaging be? What would you say, or what would you direct the CDC to say? And if Dr. Furr-Holden included in that, if you can talk about a couple initiatives that are moving right now locally, that you're working on both regionally and locally, that would be helpful.
All right, so I can answer that first and then lob it over to Dr. EJ. In a hypothetical world where I worked for the government, specifically the CDC. So the messaging, honestly, the problem is we haven't been consistent with our messaging. What we know is the very things that we said from the beginning that would protect people still hold true. Wearing a mask when you're out, when you're, in indoor spaces, not outdoors, but when you're in out at events, when you're in the workplace, when you're going to the market and things like that, especially during periods of high transmission, or the surge, as we've been calling it, it still works. We've had to update that a little bit because we've got this new variant now that I call the sticky variant. Seems to stick around in people's noses and throats a lot easier and reproduce a lot easier. You just need a better mask. You need a mask that has better filtration and is better fitting. When people first started out, people were just throwing anything around there. I would see people walk into the store and go like this, right? I'm like, that don't count. So the mask still works. It just has to be better fitted and better filtering. Okay. The physical distancing still works. How many people have now been more mindful of just how you are and how close you are to people, especially people that you don't know? The hand hygiene. COVID gets into your body in 3 ways: through your eyes, through your nose, and through your mouth. And mostly it's people doing stuff like this or whatever, cross-contaminating. Whatever you've got on your hands, when you touch your eyes, your nose, and your mouth, those things can enter into your body. So those things still work. If I were the director of CDC, I would have been a lot more consistent with the messaging. And I do unfortunately think that the CDC shifted some of their messaging because of political pressure. This need to get people back to work, I think, was the big impetus around the movement from 10-day quarantine to 5-day quarantine, just because we are in a massive shortage in our healthcare workforce. It's a bad position, I think, to put people in, because without explaining it, people are saying, well, wait a minute, it was literally yesterday 10 days. And now, with no explanation today, it's only 5 days. And if you recall, early in the pandemic, it was 14 days, and the CDC was adamant that you could not test out of quarantine. And now they're saying you can just come on out in 5 days if you don't have any more symptoms. So I would keep that messaging consistent, and I would keep reinforcing those 3 primary prevention strategies in addition to the vaccine.
Hey, real quick, Isaiah, touch on what Dr. Furr-Holden said, especially with the mask. The messaging came out that, you had people thinking that the mask will stop you from, I can't really say how they said it, but instead of saying it will protect you from catching it, it really prevents you from spreading it. And that's what they should have been putting out there. Everyone should wear a mask to stop from spreading it to another person. If you have on a mask, I'm going to stop from spreading it to you. And if the other person have on a mask, it'll stop them from spreading it to someone else. So that should have been reversed, because the argument that everyone's coming at is that mask doesn't prevent you from catching it, but it will prevent you from spreading it. And that should have been the messaging, so that could have cut down on a lot of arguments also.
I think this idea of consistency is very, very important, right? I think we have changed and confused the guidelines, but I think it highlights the earlier point that I made, that we are actively learning new information every day. And so we're going to expect that we might learn a new guideline, or we might get new data. What I think is interesting is I can't remember the last time I went to the CDC for my own health information, right? Typically, I'm going to my doctor to ask these questions. I'm not like on the CDC website to figure out what I need to do. And some of that's what we're experiencing. In real time, people are able to go directly to a source that's updating their information. And they get no context, right? This is what you just said. We don't get the story behind why it happens. We don't get any, context or story or explanation as to why we're doing one thing or another. I really, really, really think masking and preferably high quality KN95 or N95 masking is really important for all of us to protect each other and ourselves. Art made that point beautifully, right? It's interesting because we talk about the data going from 14 days, 10 days, 5 days. The data for 5 days is not terrible. And vaccinated people, we have a lower infectious load. We're less likely to transmit at 5 days. Even if you're testing positive, your likelihood of transmitting is a lot lower, particularly if you're vaccinated. And that data is actually pretty decent. But again, in a vacuum, when you're just reading something and you have no context, you have no primary care doctor, you have no trusted messengers to explain it to you, you're like, what? It was 14 days just 9 months ago. Like, there's no context. And so I think the biggest piece is consistency, and work with your trusted messengers. Talk with your primary care doctor about your specific situation and how you can protect your health, because these are evolving. You might need more context and it might change.
Art, you have the floor. Your question.
I guess, you know, touching up on what Dr. EJ said, and it's going back to Dr. Furr-Holden also with the 5 to change from 10 to 5. And just like me and Dr. Furr-Holden spoke about before, you know, with this messaging, it said that the COVID really shows between 5 and the 7th day. So if, you know, if a person's job is going by that 5-day isolation, and they say, hey, you know what? The government said it should just be 5 days, but my symptoms really didn't start showing until that 7th day. You know, they could say, hey, you know what? We can fire you, or the government said you should only be isolated for 5 days. Don't you think that's not fair for the people who, you know, where the symptoms really affecting someone in the 7-day period, and it can be spread around that time also, right? Dr. EJ?
I think a number of factors are at play, right? Is this a vaccinated person? When did their symptoms develop? When did they get tested? And also, right, there's a conversation of your employer being involved in your healthcare, right? So this again is where you should be making decisions with your doctor, and not really necessarily only in a vacuum with the guidelines we see online, which are great and informative, but are made in concert with you and your healthcare provider, right? And so your care provider says, look, you know, these are the guidelines, but I know your chronic medical conditions and you're having more severe symptoms and you need to wait, or you're still having a fever and you're having prolonged symptoms. CDC guidelines also get pretty into like what you should do if you're asymptomatic versus symptomatic. And symptomatic, vaccinated or unvaccinated, your quarantine becomes longer, right? So I think with all of these different variations, this is why it becomes important to really have this conversation with your trusted healthcare provider.
So real quick, and this might be to Dr. Furr-Holden. When you're doing sequencing, what is it, sequencing? Can you do sequencing through the what is it, the rapid test, or do you have to do it through PCR? And if you could only do it through PCR, why are we doing a lot of, or mailing out a lot of rapid tests?
That's a great question. And we actually just got a grant from the state that comes from the CDC to do genomic sequencing of COVID and other infections in Genesee County. And I'm leading that effort here. So it's a completely different process that one uses to identify the particular genetic strain of COVID that somebody is infected with. What we have been doing is, no matter what, if you provide a saliva sample that is used for rapid antigen testing or PCR testing, or if they do the nasopharyngeal, which is that deeper one up your nose, or the lower nasal swab, if there's a sufficient enough sample left after it's tested, those samples, some percentage of them in most places, are then sent on for genomic sequencing. So it's a completely different test, and you're relying on whatever bit of sample is left over from either the antigen or the PCR test sample, right? Is there enough spit left? Is there enough of, the virus left? And this is why, and I don't want to get too detailed in it, but we had these, you heard supply chain issues. Literally, it's everything from that swab. You can't just put it in saline. That swab, like for your PCR test, has to go in a stabilizing liquid that has antibacterials in it and other things to keep the sample preserved so that it can make it to the lab. They can identify whether or not it's COVID positive, and then some of those samples go on for further genomic sequencing. But most people, and when I say most, I mean almost all, will never know what strain of COVID you have. The assumption is you will have the dominant strain that's out, but the thing that Dr. EJ warned us about, which is we would have Delta, which is more severe, and Omicron, which is more infectious, in our community at the same time. And that is exactly where we are right now.
So Dr. Deborah, I've got a couple of questions. I've got a couple of Chris Caleb questions. I got a Darrell Robertson question. I'm going to throw Chris's together because both of them kind of speak to this idea of our immune systems. One is pretty much saying, hey, we're saying we got some conflicting messages. Hey, the hot toddy thing might work, but the alcohol actually compromises your immune system some way. And there is no messaging around building your immune systems organically. So why haven't doctors or the CDC come out and said, hey, alongside all of these other things, build your immune system, because folks with the strongest immune systems might be able to manage through or make it through this.
Well, I think the CDC
I'm gonna put this comment up just to wait. I was gonna put this up just to mess with Dr. EJ.
Yeah, my feelings are hurt. I say this all the time. I think the CDC is concerned with the public health response, right? That is their goal, the Center for Disease Control. They're responsible for coordinating the public health response to this pandemic, right? It's your doctor's job to have this conversation with you. And I think it was a really good point. Someone said their primary care doctor doesn't even say to strengthen their immune system. This is a conversation we should all be having with our primary care doctors. And I would say that, to some extent, we hint at parts of these conversations, right? We say, stay healthy, stay well, make sure you're checking in with your doctor regarding any of your chronic medical conditions. I am always checking with my patients about how well they're sleeping, making sure they're getting enough sleep so they can recover well, making sure they're staying hydrated. I think there's a big space to think about how if you have to encounter COVID, how you encounter it from a place of strength, which includes vaccinations, but also includes making sure your immune system is well.
Okay, and then Daryl actually comes back up. Do you got a new question, or are you?
No, I was going to add on to what Dr. EJ said.
Oh, we got 3 doctors.
No, it's not 3 doctors. I just read a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I just want everybody to know that I don't want them to have that false protection, thinking that just because they strengthen up their immune system so high that it can't touch you. Because what's the name of that crash, Dr. Furr-Holden, where the virus tricks your body into making too much your immune system?
Cytokine storm.
What is it?
Cytokine storm.
And what does it do? Describe to them, with a person with a healthy immune system, what that does.
I'm gonna hand that over to the physician.
Okay.
You're funny. So COVID is a disease of multiple sort of things, right? We worry about clots and blood clotting. That's one of the severe sort of outcomes that can happen in COVID. But largely, it's also a disease of your immune system responding, and often responding over the top, just having an over the top reaction to an intruder that has come into your body, right? It multiplies all of its immune response. It gets super activated. It activates everything. That's really exhausting for your body. It's exhausting. Your body can't sustain that. It requires a lot of oxygen and energy. And over time, it can cause your body to shut down. You don't have enough energy and resources to to power everything else that's going on in your body. And most of the response is going to responding to the virus. And that's the best way I would say to think about cytokine storm. So it's something that can happen in healthy people. Isaiah's like, wait.
No, go ahead.
No, that's it.
So I got a question I'm going to start this one with Dr. Deborah, because I want you to just take the deep dive on this one.
Yeah.
The question is, can I get this twice? Can I get it 3 times? And if you could, while you're answering that question, talk about the windows of immunity that come with getting it or getting the vaccine, like just deep dive the question about whether or not a person can get it multiple times.
And we have 2 questions to that. Somebody said, Daryl, and brother Daryl, I'm glad you're still with us and yet you have recovered. God bless you. So clearly, yes, you can get it. And he said he had it, was on event for 3 weeks and ICU for 4 weeks. Can you catch it again? Absolutely. This is not like it's not like chicken pox, where you get chicken pox and then you don't get chicken pox again. It doesn't work like that. This will be more like the flu or a cold. Remember, coronavirus is in the family of COVID-19, and the virus that causes it, SARS-CoV-2, is a coronavirus. It's in the same family as a common cold. And so infection can reoccur. How long before you're reinfected? We're still learning a lot about that. We are learning how long immunity lasts from the vaccine. And we're also learning how long immunity lasts from people who've been infected and recovered. And there's a lot of individual level factors that influence that, right? So people, for example, who are immunocompromised got authorized to get a booster shot much earlier. They are now getting their second booster shots. Many of them have been authorized for that. So Dr. EJ might want to put some bookends on it, but I've heard such different reports. I'm just saying we don't know exactly. It looks like if you're infected, you get several months of protection. But I personally had COVID. My own daughter had COVID 5.5 months in between her 2 infections.
We generally the data I've seen is around 90 days is what we kind of think that sort of innate response creates, and that sort of immunity to potential later infections. But certainly I've treated people who have gotten it multiple times.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question real quick? Does the COVID knocks the vaccination down any? Say it's at 90% and you get COVID. Have they done any studies to see if it knocks it down from 90% to 40%? Have they looked at that?
I think that's a great question. You go ahead.
I want to say something a little non-scientific about that, because I know exactly how your mind is thinking, which is if you got these antibodies and you get COVID, do your antibodies get used up fighting off COVID? Are you in that ballpark with this question?
Right. That's a legit question.
It is a legit question. I love this guy. I love this guy. I got to let Dr. EJ answer, and then I'll come behind her because, yeah.
We just talked about this, right? So all the data we have suggests that the vaccines do a really, really good job of preparing your body to form an antibody response. And the idea isn't that the antibodies don't work. When we look in lab studies, the antibodies still sort of neutralize each viral particle really well, right? The problem is each new variant has started to replicate itself much faster, right? So it's something called the doubling time, something you might hear as you're listening. Delta's doubling time was far more than the Alpha variant. Same thing with Omicron, right? We're seeing an increased doubling time, or that the virus is able to replicate itself faster, and you still only have the same-ish number of antibodies. So as it starts to match up, right? Your antibodies and your viral particles might be a little mismatched, and that's when you start to see symptoms.
And Arthur, one thing I want to let you know, it's not like what the vaccine does is it's priming the pump and getting your body trained in advance of being exposed to produce the antibodies for the virus. You see
Right.
what I'm saying? It would be like if I taught you, I said, look, you're going to be in this big fight. You fighting a southpaw, and I teach you how to fight a southpaw. You're now ready for that fight. That's what the vaccine is doing. It's boosting your body's ability to be ready for the fight by giving it the instructions in advance on how to create an antibody for that spike protein on the virus.
So using that analogy real quick, right? It's teaching me
Uh-oh.
how to fight
Analogies are always dangerous. Okay,
it's priming me to fight a southpaw, right?
yeah.
So now I get into a fight with that southpaw, and that southpaw thing almost knocked me out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So will it be able to prime me for that big fight with that right-hand person next?
No, but watch this. This is what's great. If you fight the southpaw, I have trained you, and now you fight them, you might get your butt kicked, but you've learned and are probably even more adept at fighting the southpaw moving forward. This is also one of the things we're learning from the data. It looks like people who have been vaccinated and then also became infected and recovered. And it really, it varies a little bit, based on how severe your case was, and but generally speaking, it looks like those people have a really robust response and protection from a future infection.
So Mickey Jordan has a question, and it comes kind of on the heels of a point that was made by Philip. Philip is saying, hey, there's a couple of different perspectives, if you will, or mindsets on COVID. Some are focused on prevention, others are focused on really survival, which could be the same, but could be a bit different. But quite frankly, when you don't fit in the bucket of the folks who are, and I'm going to say it just like he said it, want the jab, then everything that you bring to the table as a way of preventing this is thrown into a box that's like, okay, it needs to be scientifically proven. It needs to go through the process of these folks that, quite frankly, can't get their arms around it either. Because if there was a group of folks that could fix it, it was the CDC and this group of docs, and they haven't fixed it. So this question is about the two mindsets that are at play, and how is it that whenever you can't, whenever you don't think, okay, getting the vaccine twice and then getting a booster, it automatically gets thrown into this box of you got to prove it. When this other one isn't as proven either. And I'm just repeating, Philip, this isn't my perspective, but I'm kind of trying to read through several comments that he's made about these multiple mindsets and how we trust.
So I will acknowledge this, and I would love to hear Dr. EJ's perspective. I do personally feel like there's been an overemphasis on the vaccine. And I think it's been counterproductive. And when I say overemphasis, I'm pointing to some of the things that other people are talking about. Once the vaccine came out, we saw states rush to lift mask mandates. We saw people immediately getting vaccinated, wanting to rush back into life, what it was like, before COVID. I like that Swiss cheese model, which is this model of pandemic response and disease defense. And the basic thinking is this: no one layer is perfect, right? It's like a piece of Swiss cheese. It has holes in it. But if you stack up multiple layers, even if they have holes, as you build up layers, then you've got a wall of protection between you and a pathogen, you and the virus. So the vaccine did add, in my opinion, like professional opinion, a very important and needed layer of protection. But it's not the end all be all. We do still need those other things. And I'm kind of with Chris in a way that, I'm sorry, Philip and Chris probably, I think we do need to talk more about prevention, and we need to focus on how to prevent people both from contracting COVID. But let's be real clear. The vaccine is about preventing people from becoming severely ill, hospitalized, and dying from COVID. And those are important too. The last thing I'll say is, in those layers, the therapeutics are also important. If you're one of the people like Chris, who contracted and then recovered from COVID, you want the therapeutics. You want every available resource for you, especially if you're not doing well. I'm sorry, it wasn't Chris, it was Daryl. My bad. Sorry, it was Daryl. For the people who've ended up in the hospital and on a vent, they will tell you it is one of the scariest things that you will have and happen in your life. The experience of having an elephant on your chest, not being able to breathe, and then being put on a vent. What most people don't realize is when you go on a ventilator, you are unconscious. It's lights out the entire time you're on that ventilator. And so it's scary stuff for people. So yeah, I think we should be focusing on all the layers, not just the vaccine, but the vaccine is important for both prevention and from stopping people from dying and getting really ill.
All right, Dr. Deborah. So Arthur has a question that I want to make sure that we get in here. I got a couple of questions in the chat, and then I will tell you, Mickey Jordan, I was trying to find a way to weave your question in there. You said, can we have doctors that are against COVID on the show? And all three of these docs are against COVID. And so I just want to make sure, I want to make sure that you're asking your question. Maybe you want to throw it back in there if there's a different question than docs that are against COVID, because I would argue that all three of these are against COVID. Arthur, question.
I don't have a question. I know that you
about to teach us something else.
No. I just want to say this because I want the docs to have the last words and questions and everything. I just want to make this statement real quick that I don't want to be on a show with doctors who are against it, because it's real. I know people who have died. My friend has died. My family member has died. It's not, why do I want to bring two sides of a story? Why do I want to bring something that I'm trying to push so that people can be safe? That's crazy.
I got the question. So Mickey just kind of jumped in the chat here, which I'm glad he did. And he wasn't saying against COVID, because I think we're all against COVID. We want this shit to go away. But he was saying against the vaccine. So that's a different question. And I want to make sure that I was asking that question appropriately. So
those doctors are being evaluated by their licensing board. And I kind of joke, but I'm actually very serious, because there's a standard of care, right? There's a way we deliver medical care. And you need both sides of every story, as long as those sides are both true in healthcare. And what is not true is that getting the vaccine is somehow going to be worse than if you contracted COVID. And what is also not true is that the vaccine is somehow inherently dangerous. There's no other side to that coin. You can have a conversation about not wanting to get the vaccine, your personal, medical conditions or issues that might make you leery about getting the vaccine. But from a science and healthcare profession standpoint, there's not an other side to that coin where someone would be inherently against the vaccine. And we had this conversation in our national societies. Those physicians are being looked at for negligence and malpractice.
I mean, I understand what Mickey is saying, Mickey Jordan is saying, just like we had the conversation earlier about the cannabis and the vaccination. What he's saying is, let's bring some people on who have really done research on the what I bring on, or what I sit on, or what you sit on a panel with people who are just speaking about the cannabis, who are strong with the herbs. So I totally understand what he's saying, because that's where I'm at. Whatever, if it's scientific driven, just like Oregon State had done some type of study on it. Hey, I sit back and speak with you all day on the study, but I'm not going to sit back and talk about take this horse pill. It helped the horse from catching COVID yesterday. I'm not.
What I will tell you is if we brought on, so I sit on panels all the time. We don't have the exact point of view, and we do a little bit of prep to make sure we're kind of, know what questions we want to make sure we get asked, or, like that. But I don't always agree with everything with Dr. EJ. And she just broke something down for me in this call. She said, oh, the data for the 5 days is growing. I just looked that up. I said, oh, I got to stay really on my toes. And because I've been feeling some type of way too. Like, dang, and CDC, here y'all go again with, it's like when you playing spades, somebody call new rule and then change the trump.
Hold on. Where are you at? Where they changing the rules?
People do it. If you don't get the spade,
you want the two spade rule? Oh man, that's
yeah. People joke a deuce. Nah, we wasn't doing joke a deuce.
So Dr. Deborah, I've got 5 minutes here, and I want to pull two questions together, and I want to go to Arthur in between. So I'm going to have Dr. EJ answer the two questions. I'm going to have Arthur kind of share with us what he would want folks listening to this call to leave with. And then Dr. Furr-Holden, I'm going to ask you to close us out. The two questions that I'm going to pull together, one was about mutation, talk about how this thing is mutating so fast and so quickly, and how we fight against that. And then there's the second part of that question, or actually not a second part of that question. There's another question that talks about how many vaccines in a 6-month period could be harmful to your health. So we're getting boosters, we're getting vaccines, we might get the flu vaccine, we're talking about all of these other adult vaccines. How much is too much in our system at any time? So those two questions in between Dr. EJ answering it, Arthur will share what he wants folks to leave this call with, and then Dr. Furr-Holden, you'll close us out. Is that okay? All right, so two questions again. First question, really talking about the mutation of this deal, a mutation of the virus. The second question about the number of vaccines that are healthy or harmful to your body over a 6-month period.
I think the question about mutations is important. We expect viruses to mutate. And I actually think that Southpaw fighter analogy is apropos because, you know, as you evolve or as you try to stay fit, you will continue to change. You might change up your training program. You might change up what you're doing. You might realize you have a weakness somewhere and get better. And that happens because you're exposed to different fighters, right? You're exposed to people who might have a different skill set. Someone might have hit you with a left jab that just knocked you out, right? And you got better. You learned from that, right? You evolved. You like that left jab ain't taking me out again, right? You have evolved. You learned something. Same thing happens with variants. As they infect the population, their sole goal is to stay alive, right? They want to keep infecting people and stay alive. So they're going to learn from the environments that they're in, the antibodies that they encounter, the sicknesses that they encounter, and they're going to evolve so that they can stay alive. Every virus does this differently and is better or worse at it. And eventually we see viruses sort of pitter patter and die out because they can't evolve enough to keep up with the population. And that's what we see with viruses. So you hear all of these viruses of interest, and not all of them are successful at infecting people or causing severe illness. These viruses just keep evolving until they know they can hit you with the right jab or what have you, and be really effective at causing illness and staying alive. The second question is a little complicated, right? I don't know if you guys remember when you were kids or if you have kids, but we have entire series of vaccinations in kids that are 5 series for one vaccine. And, you know, I take my kids early to the doctor and they get 4 or 5 shots, you know, 4 vaccines. One shot for one of them might contain 3 vaccines, right? So we have really good historical data, decades worth of data that shows you can get a fair amount of vaccines in a one period of time. And Isaiah, you mentioned this question of, you know, we're getting our flu shot, we might be getting our shingles vaccine, we might be getting our 3rd booster of COVID. And all of those are sort of activating different responses in our body. And we know that to be safe. I think if you have questions about the specific vaccine, then you have to look at that specific vaccine's data, right? So when we talk about these boosters, we're not looking at it in a vacuum of saying, okay, let's just give one more shot. They're following a group of people who have had all of the shots to date, and they're seeing what side effects happened, what reactions might have happened, and we have really good data on that as well. That's positive and affirms the fact that they're safe and they're not something that we should be concerned about.
Hey, you know, every week we have done this, and every week it's a whole lot more and a whole lot more questions. You know, I still have questions, and, you know, talking about the shots, you know, have they done a study on the max that you can take? It's people scared. And I totally understand that. But what I'm more afraid of, and I'm not, you know, I'm going to say it like this. My granddaughters and my grandson, they caught COVID. My friend caught COVID. He wasn't lucky. You know, he passed away. A couple of my friends did. 3 or 4 of my friends did. I'm not I can only speak for myself. I'm not here to try to force you to take a vaccination shot. But what I want to do is try to bring people together so that we can give you serious information so that you can understand what's really going on in our community. Tony, when you see him at Tony Palladino, when you see him at a rally or protest, strong guy, strong voice, up in your face type person. When they told me that he was in ICU, I said, Tony got this. I never thought, never imagined that Tony would be dead, or I'd be speaking about Tony, what he had done or have done for our community. We have to take heed, y'all. Listen, if wearing a mask protects you from giving it to someone, it's just the wording. It doesn't stop you from catching it from someone, but it stops you from preventing it to giving it to someone. It's the word game. At least participate in not giving it to someone. At least wear a mask not to spread it. Wash your hands, like Dr. Furr-Holden and Dr. EJ said. Wash your hand. Social distancing. This isn't hard, man. And it's not like the government is forcing you, taking away your rights if you just do those 3 things. Come on, man. I mean, this is serious. This is real serious. And we really need to take heed. And, I'm going to say this one part. I am not a doctor, and Isaiah likes to be funny, everybody.
But you do ask great questions, and you are very well read. I will give you that, Arthur.
And you're trusted.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just messing with Isaiah.
You should mess with Isaiah.
Oh, no, I get it. I just didn't know. No, Dr. Furr-Holden closes the out.
Yeah, there was one little question in here that somebody had that I got distracted, and somebody said, why don't doctors talk about the impact of stress on your immune system? I'll tell you right now, stress impacts your immune system. Stress is like that silent killer. There's a phenomenon called weathering. And we actually now have biological markers to understand the impact of stress on human beings and how long you can expect to live. We've got real biological markers for it. They're called telomeres. And as you age, they shorten. And people who experience a lot of stress, people who experience a lot of trauma, people who report a lot of experiences of racism, those telomeres shorten much faster. And that's been correlated with living sicker and dying younger. So we know that stress is impactful, and I know the pandemic has been stressful on people, which is why I too am here. I am here to make sure that people have access to the best information that I have. I do my best to speak the truth as I understand it and try to speak from the data and science. And when I have to put a caveat on it, in my opinion, I will say if it's a personal or a professional opinion. But I really try to keep it in these settings to the professional opinion, because I know that knowledge is power and people need that. The myths that still persist around COVID to me are just heartbreaking. There's so many things, I don't even want to repeat them and give them weight, that people still believe are true. Smart people, people who care about their health and the health of their families and their communities. So I don't fault people. I encourage people not to attack people who are a no to the vaccine. I think how we've characterized unvaccinated has only further, had them dig their heels in and be a no. But this type of open, honest dialogue where we can answer questions, talk it through. We post opinions that people have that aren't consistent with some of the things we're saying, because that's what we're doing. We're trying to talk it through. But, as Daryl said, he said, I've never been that scared. All you thinking is you're going to die. This is the story that I hear over and over from people who are suffering at home to people who went in the hospital. My uncle just got off a ventilator and literally woke up and did not know that he was lights out for almost 3 days. He just lost 3 days of his life. there are people with COVID that are losing 2 and 3 weeks of their life. So I'm here because it's important that people have good information. And if people are no, that's your business, but let it be for fact, not fiction. Let it be for things that are real and true, not something you heard on Instagram or got out of some newspaper. That's why we're here.
Well, thank you, Dr. Furr-Holden. Thank you, Dr. EJ. Thank you, Arthur Woodson. We know that COVID fatigue is real, and if we can arm people with the best information available as they make decisions for their family, for themselves, and for their family, that's our job. And so, thank you for everyone that threw questions in the chat. If you have questions that come in later, I'm sure the docs will have an opportunity to maybe loop back and answer some of those questions. We might even have an opportunity to jump back on here later on this week or next week to answer some more. So thank you all for jumping on with us this Sunday evening. Go ahead and drop that chicken in, or the fake ribs, or whatever it is you're cooking this evening. Watch some football, spend some time with your family, hug the folks that you love, and be blessed. Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank everybody.